All right, guys. Today we're going to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation. You're going to take notes over this, and then when we're done, you'll take a little lecture quiz that will be open note. So let's get into it. January 1st, 1863. Remember, the war lasts from 1861 to 1865, so we're kind of right in the middle of the war. This is right after the Battle of Antietam, okay, one of the deadliest days in American history, one of the deadliest battles, or the deadliest battle in the American Civil War. And so it happens right after that. And so Lincoln's trying to come up with some strategies to try to end this war. Okay. And so he's going to give the South an ultimatum, and he's going to try to scare them into coming back into the Union. Okay. Emancipate means to set something free. A proclamation is you're proclaiming something, right? So he's going to proclaim that he's setting something free, or someone or something. So we're going to look at that. Okay. So the three facts about the Emancipation Proclamation that we're going to look at. The proclamation did not grant freedom to all slaves. We'll look into that here in a sec. The proclamation was a series of contradictions. Things that go against themselves. Okay, so like I think of the Declaration of Independence, right? When we founded our country, or when we said we're going to break away from Great Britain, we said all men are created equal. Well, we still had slaves, and Native Americans weren't treated equally, and they didn't have voting rights, and Native African Americans were treated. We still had slaves. So I feel like that's a contradiction in history. There's going to be some contradictions in the Emancipation Proclamation. And then the proclamation was a political and military strategy. I think that's a big one that we're going to look at here. First off, the proclamation did not grant freedom to all slaves. Okay. Abraham Lincoln, when he initiates this or proclaims this or threatens the South with this, he's talking only in these states, the Confederacy, that are still in rebellion. Okay. We're not talking about, remember, there's Union slave states. Remember, Missouri, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware. They're all right here, and they still have slavery. And so he's not going to free slaves in these areas. He's just talking about the places that are in rebellion. Okay. The threat, Lincoln announces it September 1862. I mean, he's telling the Confederacy, he said, look, if you don't join the Union, I'm going to free all your slaves. So Jefferson, Davis, and them ignore the threat. Okay. Again, this happens after the Battle of Antietam. His Secretary of State, William Seward, suggests that he should wait for the right moment to do this. And so he picks September 1862 in the middle of the war to kind of do this. But William Seward is the one that kind of helps convince Lincoln of when to do this. He finally signed it and took effect January 1st, 1863, like we talked. And again, it only freed slaves in territories that were still in a state of rebellion. Okay, in other words, the Confederacy, these states here in red. Okay, so it freed them, but not all slaves in the United States. Okay, so that's one misconception that most people have, that it freed all slaves. It did not. Okay, the proclamation was a series of contradictions. Okay, freed slaves only in a state of rebellion, like we said. Those slaves in those areas of rebellion had to find their way to the Union-held territory to become free. Right? Their slave owners aren't going to just set them free because Abraham Lincoln said so. Okay, so they still had to get to the North. They had to be runaway slaves. That's what Lincoln's saying is, if you make it to the North, you're going to be free. Did not affect slavery in the border states loyal to the Union. He didn't want to lose those states. Those were important states to the Union. And so he allowed slavery to continue there. Did not affect slavery in the Confederacy where the Union had control of that area. So like basically Tennessee, right? And then Lincoln freed slaves in territories he did not have power over at that time. So he's saying they're free in Louisiana, Mississippi, Virginia, Alabama, right? All those places, but he had no authority there. Okay, so technically it really didn't free anybody at the time. Okay, but what we're going to get into here is it makes the war kind of about slavery. All right, and there's reasons he did this. Okay, so it's a military and political strategy we're going to look at here. Militarily, African Americans now could enlist in the Union Army, and they did so in large numbers, kind of at the right time. 180,000 African Americans joined the Union from 1863 to 1865. 19,000 African American sailors joined the Navy. And really, they were more enthusiastic. They're fighting for a cause, whereas some of their white soldiers are kind of losing motivation at this point. Why are we fighting this? What, with all the death, what's the cost of this? What is it worth? Okay, they come kind of at the right time. We'll look tomorrow at the 54th Massachusetts, a really famous all African American regiment that fought heroically throughout the Civil War. We'll look at a battle maybe at Fort Wagner and kind of talk about the 54th Massachusetts. Okay, so you get an influx of Union soldiers and African Americans in the Navy. But here's really the big thing. Okay, European nations could not support the Confederacy now. Okay, and you're like, why would they support them in the first place? European powers had deep economic ties with the South. All right, the cotton industry in the South was huge. Okay, and they traded a lot with Great Britain and France. Okay, I think at the time they produced over 75%, the South did, of the world's cotton supply. And Great Britain and the textile industry there, and in France, they really heavily depended on that cotton. All right, so the South is trying to get sympathy with these areas. They're trying to get support, military support, naval support since the start of the war from Great Britain and from France. Okay. And so that's what they're looking at. But since now Lincoln, 2 years into the war, makes this Emancipation Proclamation, makes the war kind of about slavery, France and Great Britain really couldn't support them anymore. France had outlawed slavery in 1850, Great Britain in 1807. Okay, they had abolished slavery long before we had, okay, before the Civil War. Their citizens aren't going to be okay with their country sending naval and military support to uphold slavery. They've outlawed it and been against it long before we had. Right, so Lincoln knows, making this war about slavery, the South will never get support from Great Britain and from France and stuff like that. So that was a big strategy. I mean, if we go back military and politically, you're getting African American soldiers, they're more motivated, and then you're guaranteeing that European powers will not help the South during the war. Okay, so if we go back to those three, just to kind of review, okay, 3 facts about the Emancipation: it did not grant freedom to all slaves. Okay, it kind of contradicted itself. Remember, they still had border states that were pro-slavery in the Union. Okay, they did not free slaves there, and really, remember, he had no authority in those areas to free the slaves in the Confederacy. So it really didn't free anybody. And then, really, it was a big political and military strategy. Okay, that ends our notes. Hopefully, you guys got everything. Next, you'll take the lecture quiz, which should be open note. All right, thanks.